Welcome. Tonight we have Nicole Gills. She is an Arkansas diver. She went to graduate school at the University of Tennessee, got her master's in sports psychology. She's going to be helping us out. She's going to be taking a lot of questions, and we are excited to have her. And we are lucky. And anybody out there, feel free to write in a question or a comment, and we will bring it up. Okay, and we'll ask. I'm sure, as we all know, diving's a very heady sport, and she's the one who can clear our heads. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to join.
We're happy to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about your diving career?
Yes, so a little bit of background about that is I started when I was 8 years old. And I went through ups and downs like every other diver has. And then I got to compete on the international stage for the first time in 2010 at World Juniors. And I got to compete for 8 years for South Africa. And then I got the opportunity to come over to the US to come study and dive at the University of Arkansas. And now I've just completed my master's at the University of Tennessee, where I was a graduate assistant diving coach for Dave Parrington.
Wow, that is great. I actually think we have a little bit of your diving career. Let me pull up a little short video. I see Jay LaRue. I see, yeah, great. Craig Brown. I see a lot of people in the background, a lot of famous people there. And here you are at an international competition. And there's Todd Sherritt in the background and a great reverse twister. Well, now, when you were diving, you had, diving's a very heady sport. Is that what brought you into sports psychology?
Actually, I used sports psychology services as a young diver, but that's not where my passion was found. I found my passion helping out a teammate with anxiety just in everyday life, and I realized I could help other people and realized the connection between psychology and sports and how I could use that to help divers create an impact on their physical performance with their mental game.
So how did you help this teammate? Were they just nervous? Were they scared?
It actually was never in diving, so to speak, but it was more just everyday life. And for some reason, when she had a panic attack or was too anxious about something, she'd come to me and I was able to calm her down. And I just realized how much I love helping people in any way possible. And I wanted to see how I could do that in the sporting world.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, we'll be taking some questions later, but can you tell us how it helped you? I mean, did you use this as diving as well? I mean, you must have got a taste of it. We've all been through it, the fears, the anxiousness.
Yes, I experienced the fears, and I can talk about it a little bit later related to what sports psychology skills I use personally and the ones that I love. But basically, I created my own pre-performance routine with the help of sports psychologists that I got to use now for my diving on the international stage, but I also now use it in everyday life.
So where were these services available to you when you were in South Africa?
They weren't available anywhere. We really had to search for it, and it was specifically sports psychologists, and so we'd have to find a doctor somewhere. And so in the US, we have a lot more availability with mental performance consultants, which is what I am, and that just helps younger athletes not feel intimidated that they need to go to a doctor because they have an issue, but they can go for any reason just to better their performance.
Were you able to use this all the time in diving? I mean, Did it help you all the time? Did you have to revise any of it? Has you had a larger challenge?
So as with physical performance, you have to always continuously practice mental performance. So it's something I used in training and first got used to it while I was training, and I'd used it during each practice. And then once I found my groove in it, I then transferred it into competition and managed to use it in games. And then now in everyday life, if I have to present something for someone, I use that to calm down my nerves or motivate myself if that is needed.
Well, I'm going to put up your accomplishments in diving real quick here. You know, you're quite an accomplished diver. You were on the world stage. You went to World Juniors. You've been to the FINA Grand Prix in Bolzano, one of the prettiest places to have a diving meet. I would go there on vacation. It's so pretty. You got a chance to go at some world championships. So you're diving at a pretty high level. Is that extra nervous when you're on the world stage versus, let's say, a dual meet in college?
Yes, there's definitely a different level of nervousness there that I had to adjust to. But I always made sure to tune back into my sports psychology skills that I had developed and relied on that, and that helped me just calm my nerves and be able to perform at my best.
Now, you went to University of Arkansas to compete. We saw that. And then you went on to get some graduate work. Where was all of that done?
So my graduate school, I went to the University of Tennessee, and I was the graduate assistant diving coach for the swimming and diving program there the past 2 years. And that's where I got my sports psychology and motor behavior education in.
Excellent. Now, did you help coach at the University of Tennessee?
I helped coach the college team, and then throughout the summer I got an opportunity to volunteer and coach with Tennessee Aquatics and with Mike Wright.
Mike, doesn't Mike Wright go under another name when he's on TV?
Yes, he is also known as Speedo Ninja in American Ninja Warrior.
Oh, really? Well, funny you should say that, because guess who we have here? We have Speedo Mike. Hey, Mike.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, she was filling in for you while you were doing what?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was filming this season American Ninja Warrior, but I want to join in and see what's going on.
Okay, well, you know what? We have a couple pictures of you in Speedo. Now, why did you choose that orange checkered pattern?
Well, to follow up with Nicole, go Vols. I'm going to put that plug in there, but former diver for University of Tennessee, orange and white checkerboard. I had to represent the Vols and, all the divers out there. I had to rock the Speedo and show them what divers can do.
Well, you're doing a good job. This is your 4th time up there, correct? Coming up?
Yeah. This season, it's the new season 12 will air September 7th. This will be my 4th season on the show. So I've made a few city finals. I've made it to Vegas for the national finals once. But this is a real exciting season, so definitely be worth watching.
So how'd you come up with Speedo Mike? I mean, I realize you're a diver, you're in the Speedo. Now, are you on this show for the 4th time because you're good or because you look good in a Speedo?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think America likes to see the man in the Speedo run around climbing obstacles. But like I said, I've done pretty well for myself. But the brand, the Speedo Ninja is kind of taken off now. Actually, this season, I'm running for a cause. My best friend actually last year passed away in a car accident. And so I ran this season in dedication to him. He kind of was my manager, and he came up with the name Speedo Ninja. So we were just kind of talking about diving and everything, and he came up with the name, and it stuck. The network loved it. We kind of took off with social media and stuff. But yeah, my buddy came up with that, and unfortunately, last year my buddy passed away in a car accident, and this whole season's kind of dedicated to him.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Mike. Now, you're at University of Tennessee. Did you get any sports psychology degrees?
Yeah, kind of, again, to piggyback off Nicole, we kind of went down the same path. My master's degree was in science with a concentration of sports psychology. I did not go into the clinical route to become a sports psychologist, but more or less my degree is used. I kind of use it on a daily basis just while coaching, working with my kids from the age group level to the college level, and just kind of implementing those mental training, the positive training, the mental side of training just on a daily basis from the program that we both went through.
Now, do you use any of this psychology that you practice in diving? I mean, I'm going to guess the stress of being on TV, running around, jumping, swinging, running off, and falling into the water. I mean, do you use it there? I mean, you must psych yourself up.
Oh, yeah. And I use it, 100% on the show. It's a completely different game. On the TV show, one thing they don't show you is none of the ninjas know what the obstacles are. You get there on set and you get a one and done shot. You get one try to touch every obstacle. You get up there. If you fall, you go home. There's no practice. There's no heads up. There's no training on it. There's no, hey, this is what you're going to compete on. It's purely you look at it one second and then you're running through the course and happening live. So the mental side of it is kind of, preparing for that next move, preparing where your hands are going, where your body's swinging. But again, it's just a completely different mindset, going out there and saying, I only have one shot, but I got to stay in the moment.
Wow. Well, Mike, when does the new season start?
September 7th. So right around the corner. And honestly, I believe I'll be on that first episode. I'm waiting to hear back from the network, but they did tell me there'll be a full story for that episode that I'm on. So I'm pretty excited about that one.
Well, we will recognize you not only as a diver, but we will recognize you. I'm pretty sure we'll know which one's you.
I'm pretty sure when the orange and white tearaway pants come off, you'll know it's me.
Okay. Well, Mike, thanks for calling in, and best of luck and congratulations with another season of Ninja Warrior. And I was recently at a diving meet in Noblesville, and somebody mentioned how good the Tennessee divers were getting, referring to the age groupers.
Oh, great. I appreciate that.
It was good because you guys have a world-class pool there, and, the college team has always been great. Dave's only the third one in a string of amazing coaches there at the university. And, Dave's... you and Nicole are products, incredible coaching.
Yeah. And it's been great having Nicole around, helping work on the mental thing, the mental side of things, really with our age group team. I've seen kids, 8 to 10 years old, really grasping the idea of that mental training and really take off with it. So it's awesome. All in on what she's talking about.
Well, thank you very much. I know you need to get off to a coaches meeting. And we will catch you later. Thank you, Mike.
All right, guys. Y'all
okay.
Take care. Thanks. Appreciate it.
So, Nicole, what's he like? Is he on TV? Is he that super personality or?
Yes. He's very bubbly, always motivated, always ready to go. American Ninja Warrior really suits his personality. So he's a great coach to be around, and him supporting my sports psychology passion just helps it.
Great. Well, he had mentioned that he saw kids as young as 8, 9, and 10 starting to get a grasp of it. Is it important to start at a young age with the mental end of it?
It is always, as with just any sport, it's good to start young, but it doesn't mean you only have to start at a young age. You can train your brain and do the mental training at any point. It's whenever, and it doesn't need to be, I am scared to do something. It can be for you to just realize, I want to be able to set goals better, or I want to create this pre-performance routine where I can use it to help me get my goal of getting on the podium.
Well, do you find, and I'm talking from a coach position now, that there's some kids that know they're going to win, and there's some kids that just know they're going to lose? How do you train that? How do you get somebody to say, yeah, I'm in it, I'm fighting, I'm going to win? And then there are kids that just, oh, I know I'm going to lose, grumpy, loomy.
So with the kids that go in really confident and say they know they're going to win, that's always an advantage. But then where it can come and bite them a little bit is when they don't reach the goal or win, and then they don't know how to deal with that loss. So I can work with them to realize how that is not the end of the world. Let's move on. Let's focus on your next goals and focus their attention where it needs to be. And then with the divers that always go in zero confidence, which I will be open about it. I was that type of diver. That's not the way you want to go in, because you're setting yourself up for that. And so I can work with them to create confidence through self-talk, positive self-talk, through imagery, or through goal setting, so that they can increase their confidence while they're on the diving board too.
Well, I tell you what, I'm on 3 meter. I'm 14 years old. I'm doing my first back 2.5. I'm scared. What type of self-talk should I be talking to myself? I mean, I know what I said to myself and it wasn't very good, but what should I have been thinking?
So it's funny that you said 14 years old. It wasn't necessarily back 2.5, but I have a personal experience when I was 14 where I had a mental block, and it was only for a front 2.5 pike. I would not go for it. And I was taught by a sports psychologist at that point to use positive self-talk, which now with my education, I've learned what that means. And I would always say to myself, I can't do it, or I'm going to smack, or I'm going to hurt myself. And he taught me how to try and change my perspective and my mindset. And so instead, I would have to get onto the board. I'd think of 3 things that my coach told me to focus on for the dive. I'd take a deep breath. I'd say, I can do it. And I would go. And for some reason that clicked for me, and it's helped me all throughout my diving career.
So did it work instantly, or did it take some time? Did you have to practice it?
It takes time. You're not going to learn a front enough tuck as a diver overnight. You're going to have to build those skills, take those stepping stones of doing a front double on 1 meter. So it's the same with mental skills. You have to learn and take each step. And whatever I do work with during my sessions, in my individual consulting sessions, I then ask them to do some homework by practicing at practice. And once they get comfortable and realize what skills work for them best, they then can transition it into competition. And at that point, they can work out, okay, this works for me or this does not.
Well, another question about the psychological end of it. Everybody has like some type of setup they do, whether it be brush their hands, throw their Sammy down, adjust their suit. How does that work, and why does everybody have that?
To me, that can come across as a nervous habit, or it can be something that is a reminder of them to stay focused. There's one or the other. So I know some people throw their chamois down or tie it in a knot and throw it in a specific place every single time, and that's created in their pre-performance routine so that they can feel that they're in control of what they can do to perform their best.
Wow. It sounds like you've answered that question before. Well, we have a question from our audience here in regards to pre-competition routine. Can you give an example of a good pre-meet or pre-competition routine?
Yes, I can. So it's individualized, and it depends on what they like best in terms of mental skills. But my personal one is right before I get to the board, I do positive self-talk, and my words are, I can do this. Very simple, very to the point, and I take a deep breath, I say that. Then I will go into doing my own imagery, and which is also known as visualization. And so with that, I create an image in my brain of seeing myself doing that dive successfully. I then model it, which a lot of divers know and coaches know what that is, but that in sports psychology terms is kinesthetic imagery, where I will practice the dive on the ground. Then I get onto the board and I do the same thing that I've done since I was 14 years old. I think of 3 things that I need to focus on for the dive. I say, I can do this, I take a deep breath, and I go.
Well, question, when you're on the board, does your mind go blank, or are you overthinking, underthinking? I mean, what works best for most people?
It's very much an individual basis and depends on the person. My mind overthinks, and so I have to try to create a blank space. And so I think of what may happen. I need to think of what I can do and then not think anymore. Some people need to don't think at all, and they need to have a little bit of practice thinking so that they can think the right things and they don't forget what they're doing. So it really depends on the person, and as a mental performance consultant, I can help them figure out what's best for them.
I've heard a lot of divers say that they weren't thinking, they just went. You know, maybe
Yes.
It's like a blank screen and they just let their muscle memory take over. Is that one of the options?
That is definitely one of the options. I had a teammate at Arkansas who told me that she does that. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that works, that's great. But for some people, it doesn't work. That wouldn't work for me. I need a little bit of structure, and then I need to go blank so I don't overthink.
You're at Arkansas with Dale Schultz, University of Maine diver. How was that? I mean, was he your style of coach without saying anything good or bad? Or?
So originally I was recruited by Jeff DiNicola, and he's the Penn State diving coach currently. And I had him for 2 years, and then for the last 2 years I had Dale Schultz, and both of them have very different coaching techniques. So as a diver, that may be something out of your control, having a coaching change. So you need to be able to control what you can, and so I had to learn how to adjust to different coaching styles.
Okay, well, we have a question from Shelby here. She wants to know, how do you get a diver who has an issue of confidence on the board? What steps do you have to improve that?
So with confidence, there are many different ways you can work on that. And my biggest one, because I was a diver that was not confident in myself, everyone else believed me, but I didn't. And I really hounded onto the positive self-talk. So with positive self-talk, you create a phrase or a couple of words that pump you up, give you that motivation. And that should help you feel a little more confident. Another way is something called a power pose. So you stand chest up, nice and wide, and that helps you feel more confident, not crouched over and making yourself small. You want to be nice and confident and show the judges that you're confident in yourself, so that they can be confident that you're going to be successful too.
So that you're saying that your physical presence actually can make you feel better by standing taller and straighter?
Yes, there's a lot of research on it, and there's even a TED talk about it, that a power pose can create your brain to think and create your brain to know that you are more confident than you actually are.
Well, you've obviously made a lot of friends around the world. Somebody named Elizabeth Gills is watching you all the way from South Africa, and she's very proud of you, Nicole. I guess that's your sister?
It's my mom.
It's your mom. Okay. It's good to know your mom's watching. That's great. Okay.
I appreciate it because it's very late at night there for her.
Now, how far did you have to drive? How far did your mom have to drive you to practice?
So I lived in Johannesburg, where I grew up, and my diving club was about 30 minutes away. In rush hour traffic. And so my mom would always make sure that she could get me from one place to the other. And I was a child that did many different sports. And so she spent most of her days while I was growing up in the car taking me from one sport to the other. And I wouldn't be the person I am today without her.
Well, how did you get from South Africa to Arkansas? I mean, there are no roads.
Good question. Some people ask me if I've taken a boat over, but the quickest way is to take a plane, and it's a pretty long flight from Johannesburg to Atlanta. It's a 16-hour flight there, and then once I get into Atlanta, I can go wherever I need to in the U.S.
Well, obviously my sarcastic sense of humor was lost here. How did you find the right university? You're in South Africa and you find a university in Arkansas.
So I went onto the website called Divers to College and put my information out there, and coaches reached out to me. And that's how I found Jeff. He communicated with me, and I felt like that would be the best fit for me.
Do you think Jeff was a little tall for a college coach?
I do not think he was, because I am a tall diver, and so having him as a coach who was tall, he understood the struggles that I would have had as being a tall diver, since being tall is not always at your advantage when you're on the board.
Yeah. Now, did you dive any tower?
I did a little bit of tower during my college years. And funny enough, my senior year of college, I qualified for NCAAs on tower only, which I never thought I'd be able to do.
Well, you were in Zone B. That's a pretty tough zone.
Yes, it is a pretty tough zone. And at zones, I did not have the best of meets on the springboards, and I didn't want to miss out the opportunity on going to NCAAs for the third year. And so the next day I changed my mindset about giving up on my college career and said, I have the ability on tower to at least make NCAAs. Let me give it my all.
Well, that must have been tough. So what you're saying is you didn't make it on 1 and 3, and you hated tower, and somehow you pulled it off. That's pretty good. You must have been, what was going through your mind that made you want to do tower? Just the drive to get back to the nationals?
Tower was always I've always had the natural ability in it. It just was not my favorite event. But when I just didn't have the best meet on 1 meter or 3 meter at that point, I almost gave up and was like, well, that's it. But I decided, I was like, I need to end my senior year as positive as possible. And I changed my mindset somehow with using my sports psychology skills that work best for me. And I got up there and did everything I needed to get myself that spot.
What do you think would have happened had you not made that?
I would have definitely been disappointed as anyone else would, but I would have used, again, my mental skills to pick myself up and move on, especially because right after that I had to travel to Australia for the Commonwealth Games.
No. Was that at the Gold Coast? Which pool was it at?
Yes, it was at the Gold Coast pool.
Okay. Well, what would you say to yourself at age 12 if you could go back in time and write yourself a letter?
That's a tough question because there's a lot I'd love to say to myself.
About diving.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about diving. I did not believe in myself. I did not believe anyone else who told me. And what I would want to say to myself is to be more confident, trust the process, and control what you can control.
Wow. Pretty short letter. Now, I have a question for you. It seems like a lot of divers are perfectionists. And if something's a little off, they seem to get very upset over. And sometimes they don't do any better because they're focused on making a dive perfect. Is that common with athletes in diving? Is that something that's good, something's bad, something needs to be managed?
It's definitely very common, and with our sport being so technical and technique focused, you do find a lot of perfectionists. So in my opinion, it can be good, but it also can be bad. So you need to find the right balance. And in that way, that's something in sports psychology that's called energy management. And you can get yourself to a level where you are not overdoing it and then actually hurting yourself in the long run, and rather doing what you can at that point. And if it's time for you to move on, you realize that and you move on and try the next day. Not every day will be perfect.
Well, Kendall asked a question. She wants to know if you use any breathing techniques between dives, specifically visualization after a bad dive. You know, you do a dive, you smack. What happens next? How do you manage that?
So if I do a bad dive and I smack, I have to I guess what I first do is I make sure that I process everything. You can't just ignore the fact of what happened. Once you've processed that, you can then decide how you're going to move on from it. You can either decide to dwell on it, or you can move on by using your self-talk and creating that confidence that it's not going to happen again, and that you have the talent and the ability to do the dive without smacking.
Well, how does a diver convince themselves the self-talk is real? Is it something that takes time? I mean, you know, I could tell myself I'm handsome over and over again, but I really don't believe it.
Yeah. So again, with positive self-talk, it's tricky. You have to find the words that you will believe. You can't say to yourself, if I can do it doesn't work for you, then it's not going to work. You have to find those words that really stick to you and use those.
Okay, thank you. Now, what about the diver who has trouble going to do the dive, and they know they can do the dive, but they can't get off the board?
Yeah, so those are the tricky ones, and those are big hurdles you have to try and overcome. And at times it depends in your career which steps you take. But at that point, sometimes it helps to go back to the basics. Go back and do the lead up again. Talk to your coach. Your coach should be able to tell you that you can do it, or that it's not gonna be the end of the world. It's going to work out. So using the people around you, but then also going back to the basics is always a good one.
Okay, well, we have another question. I get the feeling it's from somebody you know, Chase. He wants to know if you had to choose between winning an Olympic gold medal or seeing your cat, which would you choose?
So why he's saying that, and it is someone I know, is because I am a cat lover. I can't say I could compare those two. That is just definitely not something I could compare. I would love to win an Olympic gold medal, but at the end of the day, my cat will always be there for me.
Well, if you win the Olympic gold medal, you can probably get another cat.
I think my cat would be jealous about that one.
Okay. Okay, well, Tim Fisher's asked a good question. I'm just asking if he can rephrase it so I can understand it a little bit better. Now, the diver that knows they can do the dive and they've done the self-talk and they still can't go, or the diver that consistently balks. These are common problems that coaches deal with and divers deal with. Is there a way to limit the balking to let divers know that it's okay to go even on a bad hurdle?
Yes, there is. That's where communication is the best. So having great communication between your coach and yourself, and knowing where they need to know when they need to stop balking. So personally for myself, if I got into my head, I started balking a lot more, and my coach would notice this and they would say, get out of it, or you need to just recognize that you're doing that. And then I would take a deep breath and completely forget or try and erase everything that I had done before, especially the balking, and I'd try go again.
Well, some coaches ignore the balking. Some of them yell at the divers. Some of them make them do push-ups. Is there one method that works best, or?
Definitely not. It really depends on the club or the coach and their technique and their style of coaching. But also, I feel that each coach and diver relationship is very individualized and very unique. So some divers like to be yelled at that point, but some like more encouragement. So you'd have to have a good relationship with your coach to figure out what works best for you.
Huh. Okay. Well, I think some coaches, once you have somebody do push-ups, you got to have the others do push-ups or whatever the rule they make. It's like, it's hard to enforce a rule because I like you or because, you don't respond well, as a coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you deal with that at all with your team?
Yes, balking is always, I'm pretty sure as coaches know, that's definitely a big issue in most college teams, but also in club teams. And I've had multiple coaches that do different things. So for instance, I had a coach who I had to do pike ups after so many balks, and then the pike ups would increase with each balk. Or I would have a coach where we had a certain number of balks we could do that day, and if we had got to that limit, then practice was done for us. The other one is that, which works best for me, is if I balk, I need to jump in the water straight away. I know in competition you get a restart, but it did really train my brain to realize that that first one is the best one to go on and take all of them that you can that aren't dangerous.
Well, speaking of the restart, how do you manage that? I mean, the person that balks in a major competition, what's the right way to manage that as a diver?
So I cannot talk from experience about that, but I have definitely witnessed it. And the best advice I can give from a diver's perspective, but also from a mental performance consultant's perspective, is to acknowledge that that's happened, accept it, but then go back to your pre-performance routine that is always there. It's what you can control. So I'd go back into thinking of the 3 things I need to think, take my time, say I can do this, and take a deep breath and try again.
Okay. Well, did you ever balk in a meet?
Not that I can recall. I have had a bad hurdle where I've slipped off and could not complete the dive, but I have not, to my recollection, balked at a meet.
Okay. As a diver, sometimes you see divers that do 100 dives right, and they do 1 dive wrong, and they go over, they go short, they do a belly flop or a back flop, and you talk to them, and that's all they're thinking about. They did 100 good dives, 1 bad dive. Is that common? Is there a way to deal with that? Is that good, bad?
Yes, that is very common. They dwell on the negative side of it. And as a coach, you can help that diver specifically by pointing out the things that they have done well. And so if the dive, let's say it's a very minimal type of situation, they went over, but they had the best start and they're frustrated with that, you point out that the start was important and that was progress. Then as a diver, you need to listen to that, accept it, acknowledge it, and then find your own positives that you found in it.
Okay, now I think I understand Tim Fisher's question. He's one of the premier diving coaches out in the Washington area. He wants to know, diving under pressure, are the best divers better at handling pressure, or are they better at not viewing the pressure? They don't think of it as pressure, or do they manage the pressure?
I think every diver at at an elite level knows there's this level of pressure, and they just have figured out their way of dealing with it. They know it's pressure, but they drive it into motivation or into a part of their pre-performance routine. They feel that and they change it into energy that they then can use.
Okay, because, you know, to Tim's point, there are divers that just don't care, and they dive great because there is no pressure. And then there are people who think their parents or their college scholarships depend on a great score. And then there's the diver that, you know, gets a 5 and thinks they should have had a 7, so they try to get an 8 the next time, and they've never got an 8. Then they get behind, and then they try to get a 12. And all of a sudden they just keep going downhill. How do you manage that? Is there a method?
Again, it depends on each person. So I'd work one-on-one with them to figure out what would work for them, to see. But in general, you do not want to, you need to stay in the present. You need to know what's happening at that point. Yes, review the past, but you need to always accept it. That's the biggest thing, is to move on, is to accept it.
Okay. Well, Shelby wants to know, you know, you're at a meet, a diver hits his hand or his head. How do you manage that, you know, with your diver watching that? Because, you know, they tend to focus on it.
Yeah. So from a coach's perspective, you would hope that your diver is not paying attention to the meet and those divers. If they like to do that, that helps them. Then they need to figure out that they see that and they need to erase it, or then go back into their own bubble and focus on their own dive, because it doesn't mean it's going to happen to them. From personal experience as a diver, I've been in that position where someone has failed a dive or hit a body part on the board, and I've had to try and regroup myself before going. And all I do is, again, go back to that pre-performance routine, which is basically like gold to me, and take a deep breath, think of what I need to do, and just say, I can do it.
You ever been in a situation where you had to go without doing your pre-performance routine?
Yes, and I would say that with diving, we can control. You don't have to rush off the board. So if I forget that my turn is coming up and I have not done my pre-performance routine before getting onto the board, I just make sure that I do it on the board in my head. So none of it, apart from the modeling, all of it happens internally and no one would see that. So I'd be able to do it, and a pre-performance routine, typically for divers, will only take a max of 10 seconds.
When you dove, did you dive by feelings or did you dive by spotting?
So I started by feelings. My eyes were tightly shut as a child. I would not open them. And I learned the hard way by smacking in competition, and had bruises for 2 weeks from coming out a little too late on a reverse one-off tuck. I was very young. And that's when I learned that spotting helps you, and I encourage every diver to try and learn how to spot as soon as possible.
Do you think your confidence goes up if you can see where you're going versus not?
Definitely. I think that there's that element of fear that's taken away if you can see, because then you can process what's happening and you can react in a way that works best. I know that it has to be an instantaneous reaction, but as you get used to spotting, you'll understand and be able to work out what you need to do to adjust.
Now, I've been to a couple international meets with the South African team. My impression is that they're probably not the best funded organization, and diving may not be the biggest sport there. It takes a lot of dedication and time and money to do it, and probably for not a lot of recognition also. What was it like as a young diver on the international scene?
It was tough. All all but one of my competitions internationally was self-funded, and so I'd have to find the money to be able to do that. I was fortunate enough to have some very supportive parents throughout that, but it puts that extra stress on me that I am relying on someone else to pay for me instead of not. I am representing my country, and we should get the privilege of getting to be funded, but it's just something that can't happen in our country. And so it's something that I've had to deal with and accept.
Well, did it put more pressure on you as a diver? Because your parents or whoever was funding you, they're hoping that you do well and you want to please them. And was that extra pressure?
Some people would see it that way, and they'd have to figure out a way to change their perspective. I did not. I just saw it as being supportive, and that with my work ethic, I worked hard enough to just do the best I could when I was there.
Huh. Okay. Do you have any words of wisdom for divers and coaches? And you've been on both sides. You've coached. You've been a diver. Your degrees speak for themselves. What advice would you give to a coach? Because you've seen what coaches do, and you've also been the diver at a very high level.
So the advice that I give to coaches is each person is individual and unique. And so the best way to be successful with each diver is to try and understand, communicate as much as possible, and understand what works for them without having to be too individualized that it looks like you're one-sided in a club or college team. So there's that balance that you have to try and work out. And then as a diver, my words of wisdom would be 3 phrases or quotes that I go by, and that's trust the process. It is a journey, it's not a race, and control what you can control and believe in yourself.
Well, we have another question here. What was the biggest challenge you faced in your diving career, and how did you overcome it?
I would say I've had a few challenges that would stand out to me, but my biggest challenge was definitely the coaching change. I was at that point in my life, I was very happy with everything that was happening. It was an Olympic year. I had just trialed for the Olympics and missed out by 2 spots. And I was just very focused on going back to Arkansas and training with Jeff at that point. And when I got the news that we were having the coaching change, I had to wrap my brain around it and figure out what I wanted to do in my next steps and how I wanted to handle it. And that took a while, and I had to take some time to process it and just sit with my emotions. But I do believe that I managed to do the best I could from that situation.
Well, I guess you had your mindset on a certain style and coach, and it changes, which is fairly common in our sport. There's a handful of coaches who've been there for a million years, and even Dick Kimball moved on after 429 years of coaching at University of Michigan. So that was a really big challenge.
Yeah, it was a big challenge, and it is diving related, but it's more also a personal situation that not everyone would have. But I do know people have that as a challenge, and they don't know how to handle it.
Was there a vacuum in your life when you went on to graduate school? Did you train a little bit at Tennessee, or did you hang your suit up?
So after Commonwealth Games, I decided to take a mental and physical break. And I took 6 months off to decide what I wanted. And when I started coaching again and was in the environment at the University of Tennessee, I decided I wanted to try, at least give it a shot for 2020 Olympics, which is now 2021. And it just came down to the stress of trying to juggle graduate school with my classes, training, but also coaching. And that schedule got a little too hectic for me, and I realized my passion for my future career lies in sports psychology, and I wanted to pursue mental performance consulting. So I decided in 2019, in April of 2019, at my last nationals, to hang up the suit.
Wow. Was that a hard choice? Was there a vacuum? Did you have a void? Did you watch cat videos to fill your time, or?
So I didn't really accept it at first, and I have now come to terms with it. But I think what helped is because I was still in the environment every single day, I didn't really realize that I wasn't out of it anymore. I just transitioned from being an athlete to a coach. And so I just used all that motivation and my goals in my diving career and transitioned it into my coaching career that I've had so far.
Do you have any advice for the divers that were geared up for 2020 who now have to wait till 2021 and then even 2021? So maybe.
Yes, that is definitely, it's an uncertain time, and I think that just not even with the Olympic athletes, but with everyone being able to get pool time or being able to have a season, especially with the college athletes, the best thing is to work on what you can do now. And if you can't get physical training in, mental training is just as good. There's science about it and research about it. And so do what you can do to make yourself better in this situation.
Okay, now, if people want to reach out to you, you give advice for clubs. You do like Zoom meetings for clubs, I'm guessing, right now?
Yes, so I currently do individual consulting and group consulting, where I can talk to divers and coaches about mental skills and help them create and develop their own skill set. And I do that virtually too, to accommodate those who may not be in my area, but also through this pandemic to be able to make sure everyone is safe and healthy.
Okay, well, I think what we have here is some contact information where they can reach you if they either want personal advice or you can have a Zoom meeting with your club. Diving, there's a very heady sport. And if you don't have a clear head and know what you're doing, it's difficult. If you're afraid, it's difficult. If you're hesitant, it's difficult. It takes a lot of courage. It's not like swimming where you work really hard, but, I'm not sure what they think of lap after lap, But diving, you have to think, and it may not be as much work, but it takes a much stronger head to take the mental end of it. Now, one question before we leave. Do you think you achieved everything you could have in diving?
That's a tough question to answer because I would have loved to have continued a little bit longer, but I do feel that my path in life has changed, and now me finding my passion as a mental performance consultant, I am very eager and motivated to continue to help athletes, as I have been doing so far, with using their mental game to improve their physical performance and for them to reach their goals.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much for your time and effort. Great advice for coaches and divers. Do you have any closing words before we close up?
I do not have anything specific except to all the divers and coaches out there to keep pushing through this crazy time, and all the hard work that you put in now, whether it's mentally or physically, will pay off in the long run.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicole. And hopefully any clubs or divers that want to reach out to you will. And thank you. And this concludes tonight. Thank you very much. It's been great. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.